Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today our expert guest is Marc Joyner. Marc is currently serving as the founder and CEO at ology. It is a web-based application that doubles your productivity and your free time by simplifying your life. He is the author of a dozen books translated into 20 plus languages, several of which are #1 bestsellers, including The Irresistible Offer, Integration Marketing, The Worst Case Scenario Business Survival Guide, and The Great Formula. He's a serial entrepreneur with over 30 startups under his belt. He is widely recognized as the father of online marketing for his pioneering work in the early days of the internet. His startups include ASOP, the first ebook publishing company, ROIBot, the first online ad tracking company, and First Client SaaS. SearchHound, the second pay-per-click search engine years before Google, as well as StartBlaze, the first ever traffic exchange system, which was the 36th most visited site in the world 6 weeks after its release. Wow, Marc, very happy to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get right into it. There's a lot that you've done. You are the pioneer of online marketing. I know you were one of the first names that I came across when I was getting into online marketing, and The Irresistible Offer really stuck out to me many years ago. But tell me a little bit about who you really focus on now, who your target client is, and what you hope to do for them.
That is a really great question, and the answer is kind of an evolving one. I'm going against all marketing wisdom and saying that we have a product that almost everyone alive needs right now. If you tell that kind of answer to a marketer, they'll roll their eyes immediately, right. As I would if a client were to say that to me. But, we're dealing with folks who are overwhelmed with information, who are procrastinating, who are not achieving their goals, who are desperate because of that situation. That's what ology is all about. Our primary user base is filled with entrepreneurs because so many entrepreneurs know me from my past. But, we've got people in all walks of life. We've got, work at home business owners. We've got stay-at-home moms. We've got Fortune 500s, the military, the U.S. government. We've got so many people that use the app because of that wide reach of that problem. I mean, I think it's going to get worse, actually, as technology evolves.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on. We're pulled here, there, and everywhere. And, I'm a fan of ology myself. I've been using it for a number of years, and it really does keep you straight on what's important and what needs done. So talk to me awesome. 2 or 3 of the problems that people have that ology really solves.
Well, I would say problem number 1 is one that we summarize as what we call the complexity gap. And this could be a podcast or a very, very long conversation in itself, but it boils down to this. We have the same hardware that we had in the Paleolithic era, right? But the demands of the modern world require more. So we have this hardwired limitation of how much information we can have in conscious memory. There was a very important paper written about that in the 70s called The Magic Number 7 plus or minus 2 by this guy, George Miller. And what that demonstrated was that working memory averages out to be about 7 plus or minus 2, to go, 1 or 2 standard deviations away from the mean.
Okay.
Now, you can increase that, right? There are things that you can do, nootropics, general health and fitness. There are exercises you can do to deliberately target that and improve it. And those things are great ideas. But here's the real kicker, all right? The amount of information coming into the data stream now is not only increasing, but the rate at which it is increasing, right? So I remember in around 2008, I think, Eric Schmidt was saying we're putting about 5 exabytes of new data into the world online every day, right? Mm-hmm. So that number is even higher now. So the rate at which it's increasing is increasing. So in a couple of years, we're going to be putting, as much data as we have in the entire history of man into the data stream every day, right? And then it's going to increase beyond that. It's a very, very interesting phenomenon. So can we keep up with the rate at which all this new information is being thrown at us? Probably not, right? I mean, maybe there's some technological advancement that will allow us to stay on top of that, but we actually need a system for managing ourselves in relation to that information. So that problem number 1 is what spurs problems 2 and 3. Problem 2 is one everybody faces now, and it's procrastination. And they're procrastinating because they are overwhelmed. And that overwhelm is because of that complexity gap, that, widening gap between the amount of information we can process and manage consciously and the amount of information available. We could talk probably also for hours about procrastination, but I have found that is the primary cause of procrastination today, in my mind. If you fix that, and then you fix a couple other things, which we do in symbology through the white belt training very, very rapidly, you just move past that. You're no longer a procrastinator, right? So, and then the third problem, and there are actually, several other problems that we could talk about here, but another one that's quite common is that people just feel a sense of despair because they're not achieving their goals when they're procrastinating. It actually causes a whole symphony of additional maladies in our lives. There's a lot of research to show that it causes problems in relationships. If you think about that for a moment, it totally stands to reason that it would, right? It causes depression, causes obesity, causes so many problems in our lives. So we've found that if you solve procrastination, that's a huge chunk of it. And then the next thing we do is we get people moving toward something. Doesn't have to be anything at all. A lot of people will tell you, it's got to be your passion. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. No, it doesn't actually have to be anything. I mean, look, not to disparage those guys saying that stuff. Those are useful ideas to think about. But what I've found is that if you're moving forward toward anything at all, it has a stabilizing impact in your life. The great Maxwell Maltz said, try balancing a bike that's standing still. You'll find it's very, very hard. But if you try to balance a bike that's moving forward, it's pretty easy. A little kid can learn to do it. And once they learn it once, it's, they can continue to ride a bike and they never forget, right? So we need that stabilizing force that is positive motion toward a goal.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great analogy there with the bike. Certainly a big problem with so much content and the drive for content marketing, where people believe they've got to put out so much content, but then on the other end, it's, they're scared that they miss something and they have to take in so much content as well.
Right. And it's, that fear of missing out thing. Here's how I like to reframe that for people. If you believe in an infinite universe, and I don't know of any evidence to indicate that it's not infinite, right? Every time science learns something new, we learn not only that the universe is bigger than we thought, but there are more layers, right? God, I'd love to have a conversation about that. So much evolution of scientific knowledge. But here's the thing. If the universe is infinite, you're always missing out on everything. So you got to let that go, man. And it's the funny thing. Everybody's like, oh my God, I didn't watch that last debate. I didn't hear what that person said about what Trump said or blah, blah, blah. I mean, my goodness, it just doesn't end. So you got to learn to be present in the moment and, focus on what's important to you. The trick is, how do you know what that thing is for you?
Well, take me through the white belt training, Mark. What exactly is the process there and what does it do? What is the end result of that white belt training?
Awesome question. So the end result is that you will, in the first 48 hours, you will start getting done twice as much. And I say that very confidently. In fact, I think you'll probably get done a lot more. The reality is most of the people that I talk to who actually do the work, they start getting done in a couple of hours a day what they used to get done in a week, right? Because most of us are actually hopelessly dysfunctional throughout our days. We're doing very little real work, right? We're pretending to work, and we're doing a lot of busy work, and we're doing a lot of nonsense and checking things and reading stuff and research, right? But none of it's actually moving us toward our goal. None of it's really meaningful, right? So that's the first 48 hours. And we actually repeat the same training over and over and over again during white belt so that it becomes habitualized, right? Because if I just tell you this stuff once, you'll go, wow, that is an awesome idea. That would totally change my life, but you won't do it, right? What has to happen is we have to move this from conscious awareness, from conscious incompetence all the way to unconscious competence, right? We need to make it so it's totally automatic. It's like your bread and butter. You wake up, you brush your teeth, you're using those tools that we teach you in white belt. And there are just 3 of the tools are all we focus on in white belt of all the many, many tools that are included in Simpleology, because the foundation of Simpleology is based on this philosophy we call HIME, high impact, minimal effort. And what that means is if you look at the universe of possibilities for yourself and you rate all of those possible actions by impact and ease, and you multiply that number together, the things that have the highest HIME score tend to be the best choice for you, right? So we apply that same philosophy, that HIME, high impact, minimal effort philosophy, to the order in which we train people things as well. So the first thing that we teach you is the thing that's going to have the most impact on your life and is going to be the easiest for you to learn.
Yeah, doing those activities that are going to be the best for you. You know, a lot of people spend time on social media and just basically wasting time, like you said. Now, you did say that it's a product that almost everybody uses, whether you're a businessman or a housewife, to keep things straight. So what do you say to people who don't believe in Simpleology or don't believe that they need something to keep them on track like this?
Well, you know, so first off, there's 2 questions, right? So the first guy, if he doesn't believe, I mean, you don't have to believe in Simpleology. You try it and it works for you or it doesn't, right? And it's very demonstrable, right? I mean, you can, you know, we just tell people, hey, get in there and try it a couple times, watch the training, and the light bulbs will go off instantly. If you go in there and you try it and you don't see that there's any result for you, well, then, you know, what can I say about that, right? We don't require belief because we're empiricists. We want you to experience this stuff directly and see that it has a result for you. Now, for people who don't think they need it, well, whether or not that's true depends on a lot of things. It's altogether possible that somebody is actually very level, very grounded, very happy. They're very focused on the moment. I just met someone recently who had 0 ambition, wasn't really going anywhere, didn't plan their day at all. But man, they seemed pretty happy, you know.
Right.
They said they're very happy. Now, I kind of suspect that maybe they're not, maybe they're not being 100% honest with themselves, but I don't know. You know, they've got to decide that for themselves. But what I can tell people is, here's how they can check to see if they really need it. Do they think that they're operating at their full capacity? Do they think they're using their time well? Are they using their time well, or are they wasting their time? A lot of people will go through phases of their life where they feel like, you know what, man, I'm totally cool just waking up in the morning, checking Facebook, playing video games, eating pizza. That's all I want to do. And you know what? Hey, that's great. If that makes you happy. But here's what I think will happen when you do that. I think ultimately you will start to get very sick. You will become very apathetic and depressed. Why? Because you're putting the wrong inputs into your mind and you're not moving towards something, right? And you're also, doing a lot of really unhealthy things there to your body, right? I think there are total consequences to how you live your life. And I found, for me on a personal level, when I start to drift like that, as Napoleon Hill says in this fantastic book that a lot of people don't know about called Outwitting the Devil. It's a It was an unpublished book of Napoleon Hill's for many years, recently came out a few years ago. And he talks about people drifting, right? And it's drifting off course, and that's what most of us are doing. We're drifting. We're not moving towards something. We're not purposeful. But when I'm purposeful, when I look back on my day and I know, man, I was just on today. I did everything right. I got out in the sun. I moved my body. I trained really hard. I got a lot of work done, a lot of meaningful work that moved me toward the thing that I'm moving toward in my life. When I go to sleep that night, I feel so good about myself, and the rest that I get that night is so restorative. And the next day when I wake up, I feel so much better, right? But when I drift during those days, I don't feel so good about myself when I sleep, and my sleep is not so good. And then that starts to snowball into a worse day the next day. So I believe that this is, pretty much everyone. But of course, this is individual. Only the individual can know.
And this is not only about getting stuff done business-wise as well. You are saving time to do other things in your life. It's not only about sitting down at your computer and trying to get things done. What do you say to the people who say, I don't have time to plan, I got to get to work right away?
Yeah, and I totally understand that, because I'm the kind of guy who doesn't have the patience to sit down and plan either. I want to do real stuff, right? But the thing is we need our super egos, our higher levels of awareness, whatever it is, that's going on in our neocortex, however we want to analyze that larger, wiser brain that we have access to. We need that to direct us. It's like the difference between strategy and tactics in the military, right? Tactics are what you do in the moment. Strategy is this larger decision matrix that you put on all of your actions so that you can guide yourself into good decisions when you're down there in the trenches, when your sleeves are rolled up, when you're in the fight. Because, see, I do MMA fighting is sort of a good, fun challenge for myself. And I find it a great path of personal development. And one thing that you start to learn when you get into the fighting arts is that you can't think a lot when you're in there in the fight, right? It's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the nose.
Right. Yeah.
And to that guy who says he doesn't have time to plan, I would say, well, you're getting punched in the nose all day, and you're not really able to make good decisions most of the time throughout the day. So what you've got to do is you've got to bounce your possible actions for that day against the direction to which you're moving, which is one of the things we teach in Yellow Belt, I believe. It's simple ology, and it's getting you goal oriented and moving something so that you can use that as a decision tool when you're deciding what to do that day. And when you do that, the beauty is that the rate at which you move toward the thing you're moving toward increases tremendously, and your results improve tremendously as well.
Yes, it's definitely all about results, getting things done. Now, Marc, tell me a little bit about your background. Now, you're all into the psychology of the mind, and I've heard you mention Maxwell Maltz as well as Napoleon Hill. Who have been your influences as you've gone through your life to the stage to where you are now?
Oh, so many. I'm a voracious reader, and I love to expose myself to as many powerful ways of thinking as I can. Some of the most powerful would be guys like Robert Anton Wilson, who was a great author who ended up becoming he was my hero when I was a kid. I read his books, and then we ended up becoming friends later in life before he passed away, which was so wonderful. And he turned me on to a guy named Alfred Korzybski, who wrote a really wonderful book called Science and Sanity. And it's this field of general semantics, which points out to us that our language kind of disconnects us from actual reality, and we start to bind our thoughts to language and then pull ourselves away from real empirical observation. And then he also points out that we don't even have the capacity as humans to make full and complete observations of the material world around us even, right? So that things like that allowed me to open my mind and think flexibly, to not be married to any particular philosophy or dogma or idea. And that actually ended up evolving into one of the concepts I wrote about in the Simpleology print book I called utilitarian model flexibility. And I think it's the most optimal way of being, the most optimal philosophical stance that I can think of, right? And that's that, hey, almost every way of looking at the world, every way of thinking has some utility and some purpose. And if you could flexibly allow yourself to switch in between these models at will as suits you best for different purposes, that makes you an incredibly powerful person. It was like what Bruce Lee said when he said, be like water. To me, that's the way that you can be like water in your mind.
That is awesome. Now, tell me, you've helped many people just get on track and be so much more productive in their lives. Are there any stories of specific people that you can tell who came to you for help to get their life together? Tell me where they were when they started and some of the success stories of the people that have gone through Simpleology.
Wow, so many. Actually, we have literally thousands and thousands and thousands of testimonials from people who've written into us. And I have to tell you, it's the single most enjoyable part of what we do, seeing how it's tangibly changing so many lives. One that comes to mind is one of my all-time favorite stories. There's this gentleman named Martin Bolduc. I believe he's originally from France. He lives in the U.S. now. And he gave us this really amazing video a few years ago. And he was a cancer survivor. And, part of his path to recovery of cancer was, getting his productivity and his goals and all of that together. And Simpleology was the path he chose for that. And then once he got himself in recovery from cancer, he then, this is what's so amazing about this, right? He then went on and he joined this thing called the Lee Labrada Challenge. It's this bodybuilding competition. And he told his wife, he said, hey, I think I can win us a cruise, right? and she was like, yeah, whatever, and he does it. He went out, he set out to improve his body. He used Simpleology as the way to keep himself on track and to move toward that. And he became the winner of that. And now he's like this very well-known fitness guru, and we've got so many people like that to come to us. They're in all sorts of really interesting situations. We've got one guy, for example, I can't remember his name immediately, but he was a musician. This is a very common story today, by the way. You've got it. Somebody who wants to be a musician or wants to be an artist or really originally wanted to be an actor or wanted to be something else. And they went into entrepreneurialism as a path to gain the freedom to become that. That is it's almost an archetypal story of the modern era. And this guy used Simpleology to free himself from his business and then start pursuing his music. And now he's, spends almost all of his day pursuing his music and just, a very short period of time each day managing his business.
Yeah, that's great. The power of a made up mind and taking those steps every day to stay on track, people can really accomplish marvelous things. Now, tell me, Mark, of a lesson that you learned early on in your life that still sticks with you today, something that you really live by.
Ooh, man, that's a really lovely question. Well, okay, there's so many come to mind, but let me just say the first one is that folks like us, and I imagine folks in your audience are like this as well, we're a little bit outside of the norm of society. Anybody who wants to achieve something extraordinary, who's motivated to achieve something extraordinary, I would just say it's axiomatic statistically that they are going to be a bit of an outlier, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with being an outlier is that there is a social cost for being an outlier. And I paid a price for that when I was younger. There are things that you have to endure being an outlier. Now, what happens to most people is that the slings and arrows of all of that social pressure from the crowd beat us down, and we give up what we want. We conform to what everyone else thinks we should be doing with our lives, and we end up living this life of quiet desperation, as I believe it was William James talked about, that so many people alive, almost everyone alive, lives quietly this life of desperation. And that's what happens to the statistical outlier in this world most of the time. Well, something happened to me at one point where I realized that, okay, I have to make a choice here. What is more important to me? Is it the acceptance that would come from conformity, or is it actually achieving the things that I know in my heart I must achieve for whatever reason? I'm here in this moment, in this life. I know there are things I have to do. And, there's a cost to that as well. There are certain relationships that you will have to forego. There's a certain amount of ridicule that you will have to endure throughout your whole life. I don't think it ends ever. I think you could be a very, very well established person. I mean, I think at this point, my contributions in the world are pretty well known. I feel pretty good about what I've done so far. I have a lot more to do, but even still, there are people, who will, treat me that way. And I have to shake my head and laugh and think, wow, okay, are you really saying this to me now? So I learned early on that, I could conform, but man, if I did that, I would be very, very depressed. I would not actually be happy. I would get this immediate approval from people, but then those people would own me, and I would know it, and they would know it. And that would be the overarching theme of my relationship with those people. So I had to say, screw that at some point. And I know that everybody listening has got to be resonating with this on some level, because I know people like us are in this situation. You have to make that decision on your own. But I know for me, following my heart and not listening to the crowd has been enormously rewarding. It's been very challenging, but enormously rewarding.
Yeah, I think every entrepreneur especially comes to that fork in the road to where they know they have to leave that life behind of conformity and move on to be successful. Like you say, they are ridiculed or not understood because of it, but it's something that I think they all come to at some point in their life. That's
right.
Now, Marc, you said you still got a lot more to do. So what's next as far as Simpleology goes, and what's next for Marc Joyner?
Oh, you asked the best questions. Well, I would say for Simpleology, we just released this new cool tool called Simpleology Systems. And it is a tool for managing the systems that run your life and run your business. And you can do it all from within the context of everything else that we do inside Simpleology. That has me super excited because I don't see any other tool out there like that allows you to manage systems correctly, right? Most of the way people manage systems, I find totally broken, and they're not sustainable. For example, people might make this enormous process map, and it could be very, very well thought out and a great piece of work, but people just don't use it. They create that and then it starts collecting dust. So this is so much better because it's a simplified way of managing systems, and it's within the context of what you, the individual, are doing on a day-to-day basis, which, by the way, if you get your employees using this, it allows them to bounce what they have to do for you in the context of everything else going on in their life. And it resolves one of these primary complications that make business relationships so difficult. So in Simpleology, we're focusing on that right now. We're rolling that out to people, and we're learning from how people are responding to it, and we're improving that. And I don't want to tip my hand too much about some of the future stuff we have planned for Simpleology, but that's that. In terms of me personally, there's a lot of stuff that I just wouldn't talk about my personal goals, but I'll say one thing, and that's that ultimately I want to contribute more and more to ways that we can provide some stability to this world. I think personally that the world is going to improve in a lot of ways from technology, but it's also going to create not only many new challenges, but challenges that surface rapidly as well. We were talking about that rate at which information is being released into the stream. Well, technological innovation is occurring at an equally increasing rate. So, we don't know when a black swan event will occur and totally change the landscape of the world, right? What happens if a technology comes out that makes anyone have access to a very, very powerful weapon, right? Which I think is inevitable, right? Because that kind of thing is inevitable. I think we need to start sowing the seeds of cohesion on this planet. I think that the only way to address these things is by addressing it as a mental thing. We have to get rid of the will for people to destroy each other. Otherwise, I think it's inevitable. So, I think, it's important for me to make contributions there. And I think it's important for everybody to think about that and to make contributions there. And we have to think very deeply about what that means on a day-to-day basis, how we show up and interact with people.
Well, we appreciate the contributions that you've made so far, Marc. You've given us a lot of information. If there's one thing that we may not have covered yet that you'd like to share with somebody who is, in that state of procrastination, what would that be?
Well, what I would say is, first of all, look at this gentleman doing this interview right now. He reached out to me, asked me to do this. We're on this call. We're doing this. This is what it takes, right? You have to decide to do something, put the wheels in motion, and get it done. And it almost doesn't matter if you're stuck thinking, well, I don't know what my passion is, or I don't know what my life purpose is, or I don't know this, I don't know that. No, just forget all that and pick something. And you will find there is a miraculous effect of just picking something. If you don't know what your purpose is, think of something you could do for somebody else, or think of something that would be an inevitable step along that way. You got this sort of vague vision of the future, what you might be. Well, you're probably going to need a little bit more money than you have right now, for example. Start thinking seriously about entrepreneurialism, if that fits for you. If you think, well, I don't know which idea, pick one, because you will learn 100, 1,000, 100,000, a million times more doing something that's the wrong idea than sitting around and thinking about which idea is right. Now, look, ultimately, picking a good idea and planning things properly has a positive effect, right? For sure. But while you're doing that, you should be day to day engaged in something that is going to build up your entrepreneurial chops. Now, I think you can take what I just said and apply that to just about any walk of life. If you're in a job, maybe you don't know if you want to stay in that job, whatever. Well, I tell you what, here's the way I look at that. When I was in the Army, they gave this really, really great piece of advice. It kind of floats around Army circles. You might hear other Army veterans talk about this. And that is, even if they tell you that your job today is to clean the latrines, do the best job you possibly can cleaning the latrines. Now, why do they say that? They say that because somebody's going to notice that, and you're going to move up to something more complex, right? You'll move up to something better. You're not going to be the latrine cleaner forever. But also, the subtle thing is that when you're in the moment and you're doing that thing well, you transform in this really fundamental, important way. There's this old saying, they say, how you do one thing is how you do all things. And if you can learn to do that one thing well, whatever it is that's on your plate, in front of your face, the 6 inches in front of your face right now, you can learn to do that really, really well. Something perhaps bigger than those long-term plans you have will change inside you.
Well, I love that, and it's all about taking action, and there's certainly no better way to take massive action than to use simple ology to keep you on track and get so much more done every day. Marc, how do people find out about you and simple ology? Where do they go to connect?
Well, if they go to simpleology.com, that's simpleology.com, simpleology.com, they can go in there and set up a trial and check it out. And again, immediately when they log in and get started, they'll start that white belt training. So there's only two things you ever have to remember about Simpleology, and that's you log in every day and you click the Do Today's Training button. That's it. You don't have to think of everything else. We literally will guide you through the rest, right? And if that's the only thing you remember and the only thing you do, we've got you covered, right? So that's the best advice I can give.
Exactly, and it's all about habit. I'm a user and wouldn't do without it. Marc, I appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. I've enjoyed hearing everything that's in your head, or a small part of what's in your head. Thank you very much for being on the show, and we look forward to hearing more from you soon.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Well, to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.